Okay, good afternoon and good morning to all of you on the line today. Wherever you are in the world, it's a pleasure to have you join us. I'm Dave Evans, the Managing Director for Kantar Consulting Retail Insights here in Europe. And so a very warm welcome to you all to our eBrand ranking webinar, collaboration between Kantar Consulting and mySupermarket. Just a few housekeeping things before we do kick off today. If you experience any issues with sound or the visuals, please first try refreshing your web page. If that does not correct the issue, please open the URL in a different browser if you have one on your machine. If this still persists, please reach out to us through the Q&A box that you can see on the screen. For the rest of the console screen, you'll see the main presenting area. You can enlarge and move that around as you see fit. And you'll also notice 3 additional boxes on the screen in front of you. The first one is a Q&A section. You can use that throughout the webinar to talk to us and send us any questions that you may have. We will try and answer questions as we go if they're appropriate to where we are, or we will pick those up at the end that we can answer. Any questions that we don't get to answer today will of course come back to you directly via email. The second thing that you'll see is a direct mail box. You can use that to reach out to Viv Krask from mySupermarket directly to ask him questions and follow up after the webinar. You'll also see a resource list on the left-hand side, and within that we've got a link to our e-commerce and Amazon planning workshops in Amsterdam that happen in May. You'll see on the screen now that we've got details of those couple of things. What we cover today we'll be covering in even more detail at that event in May. So you'll have more of a chance to explore firsthand the eBrand ranking solution, talk to Viv and the team. So for those of you, many of you are already on the call today, already signed up for the event in May. If you haven't done that yet, please use the link there on the screen. You can find out more about the event and of course register. So without any further ado, just to kick off for today, we are really excited to be sharing our perspectives on the rapidly evolving e-commerce and digital landscape with you today, and in particular how we're helping businesses understand it and improve their capabilities and results. The key topic for today is an eBrand ranking solution with mySupermarket, and really it brings together 2 experts in retail. We've been working together to think about how solutions are really needed by businesses and retailers and suppliers. So mySupermarket's expertise in analytics and looking across those retailers that we all deal with in the e-commerce space, and certainly Kantar Consulting in our retail sales and shopper practice, delivering you insights and strategic excellence. So a great partnership that we're creating to give you sort of unparalleled knowledge of your e-commerce brand health. But I'm going to hand over to our speakers today to do a much better job for you and talk you through that sophistication that's in e-commerce and the landscape we're facing, but also the eBrand ranking solution that Viv, the MD of mySupermarket, is going to present and share to us today. So an exciting agenda ahead. So firstly, what I'm going to do is hand over to Malcolm Pinkerton, VP Retail Insights here at Kantar Consulting, and he's going to give you some context for why we're looking at performance in e-commerce. So Malcolm, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dave. So in terms of the agenda of the day, and I'm going to start off just giving you a bit of a brief of the e-commerce challenges, and then I'll be handing over to Viv to really drill down into how the eBrand ranking actually helps meet some of those challenges. So without further ado, I'm sure many of you are aware e-commerce is rapidly evolving and rapidly developing. There's never a dull moment. So what are the key things that we have noticed, and I'm sure everyone on the line is aware of, is that the shopper journey has become incredibly complex. And the number of touch points has pretty much exploded. And being able to provide a consistent experience of the brand at every single one of these has become an absolute imperative. That consistent, seamless experience is almost the utopia. And that is because shoppers have become incredibly demanding. And if you look at the right-hand side, you can see just some of the things that consumers are becoming to expect from their favourite brands and retailers. So it's a good job they're not that demanding when they start looking at the kind of things that they really want and see from their favourite retailers. But it's not just in terms of what their expectations, it's also starting to understand how they shop online and really drilling down into the two distinct types of shopping. We class it as spearfishing and full basket. So what we mean by spearfishing, well, this is really how you shop on Amazon. You go there for a specific mission, an occasion, or a specific item. Here, brands need to optimize their keywords and curate strong product pages. It's all about having that strong image and being discoverable. When we talk about full basket, this is when we look at the likes of Ocado and the likes of Tesco. Here, baskets are much bigger and tools and levers are very, very different. So the kind of content that shoppers are looking for is less research intensive than it might be on Amazon. But what consumers or shoppers are looking for here is inspiration and clear images of the items. So really it's very important to understand the kind of mindset and mission and occasion that consumers are looking to fulfill when they come to different types of retailers, and the different assets that you have to deploy to win and convert. So once we really start to understand that, it's really also to start to recognize that everyone is facing very similar blind spots that need to be addressed in order to really start driving growth. And what we mean by blind spots is those common things that are really on the horizon that we really need to be mindful of. So for example, we can't rely on big box retail for growth anymore. We have to recognize the fact that we have new customers that we have to start dealing with. So Amazon and Alibaba. So it's not just about your legacy customers behaving in new ways, it's understanding that you have to deal with totally new customers which require totally new mindsets. And that's because they are about managing a portal. You can't negotiate with an algorithm. You can't take an algorithm out for lunch. It's understanding the operational excellence you need to achieve to win in e-commerce with different customers requires different skill sets. And you also have to recognize the fact that a lot of the customers that you are dealing with, particularly the likes of Ocado and other pure players, are really one step ahead. So you now need to innovate at speed and almost adopt that fail fast and lean in to win. And it's also imperative to realize that in a digital world and a digital first environment, your competitors might not be who you think they are. And that's because we have digital native brands who know how to win in that digital first environment. So when we start to look at some of the key requirements to win then, well, we really start to realize that I think retailers realize things very, very quickly. Firstly, they realize there's a mentality shift, and they also realize there's an alignment shift. When we talk about a mentality shift, those who will win very quickly realize that their brands have to live and breathe, and their products have to live and breathe in a primarily digital first or e-commerce first environment, and create engaging and enticing and compelling experiences at every single touch point and every single interruption point and consideration set. And when we talk about alignment shift, that's recognizing that you have to break down the silos. You have to make sure that sales and marketing work together. And you have to recognize that you need a new set of KPIs and a new set of way of visibly returning that investment and recognizing what success looks like. And when we talk about what success looks like, we often talk about fixing the basics. We often talk about getting the basics right. Now, we don't want to bang on with that drum too much, but it is absolutely imperative to build solid foundations. There's no point in doing all the really sexy, glamorous stuff which really drives traffic and drives traffic to the site if you haven't fixed the basics and you haven't got the primarily fundamental aspects right. And only then can you really start to drive huge amounts of traffic to the site to win that conversion. And when we talk about win that conversion and we think back to that very complex shopper journey and that path to purchase, the one thing that the consumer is looking for is that consistent experience of the brand. They see and shop the brand, not the channel. So it's absolutely imperative that your brand is correctly represented, discoverable, and provides engaging experiences at every single touch point. So here on the screen, you can see just a few of the absolute imperatives that you need to start getting right, and you need to start measuring that you're consistently getting them right. And Viv will talk a lot more about how the tool can help achieve that. So when we start to look forward, we can start to see, okay, we know what we need to measure, we know what we need to get right, but we need to understand how we can actually KPI this and how we can consistently monitor it. We know we need to drive incrementality, and we know that e-commerce is not just about an individual sales channel, but how it has a halo effect in driving growth elsewhere. When we look at the soft objectives, these are the ones that we can really start to impact and really start to have a tangible shift to impact our overall brand equity and start to leverage different touch points such as social media to drive brand advocacy. So before I hand over to Viv, I think it's just a case of really leveraging some of the key aspects or considerations for this year and beyond. And again, let's think about fixing the basics now. It's about auditing your product presence in terms of the content and ads. Is it right for the platforms that we're selling through when we think about that spearfishing versus full basket? It's taking ownership of your data. One of the most important things going forward is going to be data and data analytics to get a better understanding of who your shopper is and what they expect of you and how they're behaving. And it's about building the right capabilities, not just in terms of the internal organizational structure, but in terms of the toolkits that you need to ensure that your brand is performing, exceptionally performing across every single customer and consistently hitting the targets and consistently hitting the KPIs. And when we talk about organizing for e-commerce, that's about those new skill sets and the new mindsets that you need, not just to deal with how existing customers are behaving in new ways, but how new customers, such as Amazon, operate and how you can win with them. So that hopefully has provided us some good foundations for Viv to continue, and the need for a joined up e-commerce solution to help achieve some of those objectives and challenges. So Viv, over to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. So some of you may know mySupermarket Business Solutions, especially if you're based in the UK or Europe, and some of you may not. So we are a market intelligence company focusing on e-commerce that provides joined up e-commerce solutions. There's a number of parts of our offering. Some of you may have worked with us around our mySupermarket Retail Lab, where we use our UK-based platform, which is a price comparison site that works across all the UK major retailers, to allow you to test concepts that are difficult to test with the retailers, or you want to test across a variety of retailers. So, for example, A/B testing of mobile-ready images, A/B testing of taxonomy, or discovering your search terms, things like that. Another area we focus on is smart tracking. You may know our Metrico product, and within that same family now is eBrand ranking, the subject of this webinar. And then finally, you may know us as a media channel if you're based in the UK, where you can use our website to test your media and drive efficiencies with your customers, the retailers, or use us as an activation channel. So there's a number of things that we do at mySupermarket Business Solutions, which puts us in a unique position to look at how we can track your e-commerce portfolio. And then working with Kantar Consulting, we've taken our knowledge and built a product, eBrand ranking, that is best aligned to what kind of activities are driving sales within the e-commerce channel, so that you can become the category leader in your field, or at least beat the person who's doing slightly better than you. So first off, there's some key challenges. So the number one problem in e-commerce is that really the e-commerce is a bit like the Wild West. There's very few clear metrics, and there's a number of pieces of the puzzle missing. So simple starting points like, how strong are my brands within the channel? What really is driving sales? And how does e-commerce differ to traditional retail? And we think that eBrand ranking solves some of these problems pretty well compared with what you might already be using at the moment. The next challenge is, how do you track? So tracking your brand's e-commerce performance is really a bit of a dark art, shrouded in sorcery and guesswork at the moment, or it's just very, very hard work. If you're on the call, if you've ever had to, within your team, pull together all your EPOS metrics across the UK or across Europe or across the territory you're in from multiple sources, you'll know how long that takes and how difficult it is to even get to a clear picture of your sales performance. So when it comes to tracking your brand health, I'm sure you can imagine it's even more complex. So because online shopping is different, the KPIs and metrics are different, and we need to understand what the right metrics are to track and which are the ones most likely to be driving your sales within the category. So what and how to measure is not always clear because there's no established best practice in this channel. And then there are unique things to track with no real-world equivalent. So in the UK and in some other territories, you have favourites, prime place for shopping, but because there's no real-world equivalent, it takes a different approach of how to benchmark and how to track your share of favourites to drive sales. And problem number three is what to tell the boss. How do you explain the size of the prize, the size of the e-commerce prize, to the business or your or who you directly report into? And it's not really clear how to deliver the size of the e-commerce prize at first. And then the next challenge is you might have an e-commerce strategy, but the size of the prize can shrink in the execution because it's not always clear the activities you do, how those are resulting in driving sales or costing you sales. And finally, maximizing ROI in e-commerce by doing it properly is a challenge because it's such a complex challenge where many of the drivers that can really affect sales are controlled by the retailers, your customer, and not by you. So with this in mind, there are three ways that you are either losing revenue within your category or driving revenue. So first off, if you're not clear what the exact sales drivers are in the e-commerce channel, that's lost revenue. An example of this is ratings and reviews. Is it really a driver? Does it really drive sales? Or is it something you should focus less time on? Lost media efficiency. Media buying with your customers is a little bit like putting sales and marketing money into a black box. So sales and marketing money, advertising money goes in, revenue comes out the other end, but if we're not clear what happens in the middle, how do we drive that media efficiency to be as efficient as possible? And your future revenue is at risk if your resources, your time, your people are poorly aligned to what really works. So if we're not clear of what the drivers are today, how do we know what the drivers will be tomorrow? So, for example, will my favourite strategy really drive future sales or not? Will my Amazon strategy really drive future sales or not? Where are the true growth drivers? So to give you an example of what that revenue could look like, let's take an example of a business that's making £45 million e-commerce revenue, and let's say they spend £500,000 on retailer media, just as an example. You could easily imagine that not knowing the exact sales drivers in the channel could cost you at least 10% of revenue within that channel. I'm sure you could easily imagine that if you don't fully optimize the media that you've bought with the retailers or across online, that lack of media efficiency could cost you 30% of those sales. And of course, future revenue, who knows the cost of your resources being poorly aligned to what really works. So at a base minimum, that's an extra 4.6 million you could be making, or to put it another way, another 4.6 million you could be losing to your competitors. So that's the reason why this is important. The ugly bottom line of all of this is that time and money spent on e-commerce in the past has been wildly inefficient compared to traditional retailer. And in talking with clients, this is no longer acceptable. The expectation is that an e-commerce strategy and the ability to track within the channel should be clear, it should be sustainable, and the numbers should be clear. So we need a better solution. We need a simple way to understand your performance within the category, within the e-commerce channel. We need to make sense of multiple channel metrics quickly without it taking 2 weeks to pull them all together and without getting a headache doing it. And we need to link the size of that prize to a single brand health KPI that is linked to the true sales drivers in the channel. So we believe we have that solution. That solution that we have worked on together is eBrand ranking. So let me explain how it works and how it can benefit you. So it's a single ranking, one number to track of your brand's performance within the category. So let's take for example, the example of laundry, and the winner in this category, in these theoretical numbers here, is Persil. And because Persil is the winner overall in the category, it gets given a score of 100. That doesn't mean that Persil is perfect in doing everything right. It means that we benchmark them at 100, and we benchmark all the other brands against Persil. So it's a simple, clear way to measure your overall performance, your overall brand health within the category. Within the category, Persil is leading, gets a score of 100. Surf is next with 78, and Ariel with 72. And how we do this is using a proprietary algorithm that's based on 10 years of FMCG e-commerce analysis that's made up of a variety of factors. It's also a continuous measure, so the data streams in from our different metrics daily, and we publish the results on a monthly basis so you can track your performance over time. So there's a number of metrics and KPIs that we're tracking that makes up this number, such as store level availability, your exact stock and availability in each individual drive or e-commerce pick store, your share of search, and your favorites impact. And the most interesting thing about this number, not only is it simple to talk about within the business, but it means that the pure strategic focus of the business in the channel then becomes beating the nearest competitor. So if you're Ariel, you don't need to work out how to get to 100 to drive significant sales. You only need to work out how to beat Surf that are 4 points ahead. So there's a wide range of metrics that we use to calculate the eBrand ranking that fall into 3 areas: fix, build, and impact. In the fix category, it's mainly around compliance, product title compliance, image compliance, ingredients and description compliance. So is what's showing up in the e-commerce retailers what is in your digital asset management systems such as Brand Bank, or is it what you've sent to the retailer? In build, we're looking at how your brand is building its equity online and driving sales. So what is your assortment against your expected assortment? What is the availability at store level? What is your share of shelf? What is your share of search and your share of favorites? And what is your rating and review score for your brand? And then under impact, we're looking at promotional indicators. We're calculating the value of your brand, which is a mixture of sales, volume, and price benchmarked against your competitors. And we're looking at interesting factors such as novelty and NPD. With NPD, it's not so important how many shelves your NPD is on today if you're launching today. What's important is how many shelves you're on in 6 months' time or a year's time as to how that impacts your brand's performance. So what we're doing is we're taking all these different metrics, some pure metrics, some calculations according to what we believe are the sales drivers in the channel, and we're calculating that into a single score, and we're weighting different metrics with a different weight according to the sales drivers within the channel. The data is updated daily. We're benchmarking against the category as a whole, And you can use this algorithm to drive efficiencies and effectiveness from within the business. Let's look at what the ranking shows as to who is winning in some of the most popular categories. So here's a selection of categories as of end of March 2018. You can see here we've got some of the most popular categories: laundry, beer, tea, breakfast cereals. And what you might notice is how this brand ranking provides some interesting winners that you might not expect. So if we look at beer and lager, you'll notice that Budweiser comes out number one as its brand health within the channel. Taylor's of Harrogate is number 2 in tea. Car is number 3 in fizzy drinks, just behind Coke and Pepsi. And Kettle Chips is number 2, directly after Walker's. So because we're calculating the metrics that are aligned to brand health, these brands that are overperforming in their position in traditional retail are the ones that are most likely to have the strongest success in e-commerce today and tomorrow. Let's look at some other categories. Here's a number of other categories that you might be interested in the call, such as cleaners, coffee, body care, toothpaste. And finally, some other categories here, such as juice, energy drinks, biscuits, deodorant, cheese, and vodka. So we can look at your individual category for you if your category isn't shown here. So just drop us a note during the webinar or after the webinar if your category isn't shown. This product has just launched, so we've mapped these 20 or so categories first, and we're launching in the UK initially, but we're looking to roll out pretty soon afterwards. So if you're calling in from somewhere outside of the UK and this interests you, do get in touch. So how does it work for you? So essentially what we do to turn this into a practical tool within your business is look at the top level ranking of the top 10 brands in your category or subcategory. And then we'll do a deep dive analysis into your brand and a deep dive analysis into your competitor to see the differences between them. And then we'll look at what the key drivers are at a driver level and at a retailer level to find out which drivers you need to fix next and in which retailers they need to be fixed. And that's all wrapped up in a consultancy offering to help you unpack the real, true, actionable next steps to drive sales. So we think that this eBrand ranking solution helps save you time and resource. We like that it's a data-driven way of working to keep you on track and align your business activities with what's really working. And because of that, it helps your team prioritize. If your team is, say, particularly focused on its Amazon strategy today, or it's particularly focused on content or rich content, and you look at your eBrand ranking and you discover that search or availability or its NPD performance is causing you problems in the category, then that helps you prioritize and shift your focus. So let's look at some case studies. We're going to look at 2 case studies, one in the cereals category and one within beer. So let's have a look now. So we're going to look at Kellogg's and Weetabix in the cereal category overall. So here again, you can see the ranking for cereals as of March 2018. And you can see that Weetabix is number 1, followed by Kellogg's, Shredded Wheat, Cheerios, and Shreddies. Now let's rank each brand in the top 10. So here you can see that Weetabix has that score of 100. Again, it doesn't mean that Weetabix is operating perfectly within the e-commerce channel. There's certainly lots more to do there. But we rank the winner in the category at 100 and then benchmark other brands against that. So Kellogg's is there at 95, 96, and then you can see the other brands within the category. Now let's look at the rank over the next 12 months. And this is where things start to really get interesting. So if you look at this, Weetabix and Kellogg's, the major cereals providers, all experience a downward trend of their eBrand ranking over the last 12 months. The only brand that isn't experiencing that downward trend is Asda. So Asda own label cereals. On the graph here it looks like Asda's pretty flat, but when you actually draw a trend line through it, you see it has a slight upward curve. So the overall message that eBrand ranking can give to this category is that the major FMCGs are experiencing a downward trend in their brand health, their brand equity in the channel. And the biggest threat is coming from own labels such as Asda, which has experienced a slight upward growth over the last 12 months. So now let's start comparing Weetabix to Kellogg's to see what we can learn. So here we have Kellogg's measured against that top score of 100 in all the individual drivers that make up the score. And you can see here areas where Kellogg's performs really well. So ingredients compliance, it gets a near perfect score. And name compliance, the score is really, really strong as well. Novelty, the NPD factor, is very high as well. You can also identify drivers here where Kellogg's is not performing as well as perhaps they would like, such as share of search and image compliance. But in order to work out what to do now, you can identify where Kellogg's can drive an advantage, but it's also worth comparing against a nearest competitor to see what we can learn from a competitor's performance. So here if we compare Weetabix in red to Kellogg's in green, we can identify areas that Weetabix is currently stronger that perhaps Kellogg's should focus on. So areas such as share of favourites, Weetabix is significantly higher than Kellogg's. Ratings and reviews, Weetabix is higher. Availability, Weetabix is higher. But for example, there are also areas where Weetabix can learn from Kellogg's. So for example, if you look at the novelty column on the right, the measure of NPD success in the retailers, you can see that Kellogg's is doing significantly better at the end of March compared with Weetabix. Now let's look at this data over a time period. So let's look at Weetabix's performance over the last 6 months. So here we're looking at May versus December. So May is in yellow, December is in blue. So the first thing we can notice is that one of the key drivers here is the drop in shelf placement. This is a drop in share of shelf. There's also issues around the promotion score, the value score, and the novelty score. So what we can do now is pick on one or two key drivers and dive into that driver to find out what's really going on at a retailer level. So let's look at shelf placement, where the score has dropped significantly over a period of 6 months and is likely hurting sales, because if you're not, if your score on shelf has dropped dramatically, it's a bit like your position in Google search, dropping from page 1 to page 2. All of a sudden, the ability to make sales from your position on shelf is diminished. So what's really going on here? So when we dive into the driver, we find out that the drop in shelf placement is driven primarily by two retailers, Ocado and Waitrose. And if we look at May, the product position, the position on shelf of the leading Weetabix product was position 1.7, which means that for most of the time during that time period, it was in position 1 or 2. Now, if we look again 6 months later at December, the best position of that product is now gone down to an average of 27.5. So a huge drop from being in position 1 or 2 all the way down, much lower down. The 5th row in Ocado from the first row in Ocado. So that must be driving a significant decrease in sales. Even worse is if you look at the placement of the leading 3 products on average. So we take the best performing 3 products in shelf placement in Ocado, and the average placement in May is 26. In December that plummets to 138. And you have a similar story in Waitrose. So here's the really interesting thing about working with eBrand ranking. We can see from the data that something significant has happened. It doesn't necessarily know that the data itself knows why. And when I recently spoke at a conference and shared this story, someone from Ocado came up to me afterwards and said that they knew why this was. When I've discussed this with cereal manufacturers, they weren't aware that this had happened. So what's really powerful about this is using data to understand what's really going on in elements of e-commerce performance that's driving your sales that you and your team might not be aware of otherwise. Okay, let's look at our second case study now of the beer category. So here we're going to look at a number of brands, Stella, Budweiser and Guinness. So just to remind you again, here is the eBrand ranking for March 2018, and you can see top score is Budweiser, followed by Stella, San Miguel, Peroni and Corona. Let's look at the top 10 brands and see where they place. So Budweiser has that score of 100 because that is the best performing brand within the category in March 2018. And benchmarked against that, Stella has a score of 78. Guinness has a score of 62, and you'll notice that San Miguel is in third place at 77. So now let's start comparing this trended over time. So if you look at 2017, the 12 months of 2017, you can see a really different story in this category compared with cereals. So here you can see a story of some really strong growth within the category. So if you look at San Miguel, the black line, there's been a huge leap from September to Q4 to the end of the year. Great success story there. If you look at Stella, there's a slow and steady rise over the year of their performance within the category. The red line, Peroni, you'll see a strong success story with a sudden peak at the end of the year. But the real success story here is Budweiser, that's shown a huge, impressive leap from where it was at the start of 2017 to where it ends at the end. And very quickly, around March time, it overtakes the leaders in the field to become number one and then increase its lead throughout the year. So why is that? What's driving that? Let's have a look by comparing what Budweiser is doing against number 3, San Miguel, because it really makes the differences very clear. So if we look at Budweiser here in green, we can see there are some key areas that Budweiser has hugely outperformed San Miguel. So particularly if you look at assortment. So the assortment that Budweiser has in store is much stronger than San Miguel's assortment. If you look at favourites, Budweiser's share of favourites is much stronger than that of San Miguel. And if you look at the value score, which is a score around the price compared with the category and the volume of sales that are being driven through the retailers, you can see that Budweiser is incredibly strong compared with San Miguel. There are also areas here, of course, that Budweiser can learn from San Miguel to make its score even stronger. So if you look at ratings and reviews, San Miguel is doing a much better job around ratings and reviews than Budweiser. So now let's compare Budweiser against the entire category. Let's look at where it's performing well and where it could still improve. So what's really strong, as we said before, is novelty, its NPD score, and assortment. But there's some key areas here that stand out that is weak, that Budweiser could strengthen. So this is in areas of its share of search and in its promotional score. Now let's shift our focus to Guinness, and let's look at Guinness over the last year and see what we can learn here. So if you look at the graph top left, you'll notice a steep decline from February to April. And it's really interesting because those of you who are avid Guinness fans will know that St. Patrick's Day was 17th of March. So this is a key trading period of Guinness. So what we need to understand is, were the Guinness brands simply showing a drop in its brand health because it went from a period of high trading to a period of low trading, or are there other factors at play here that Guinness should pay attention to? So there are two reasons for this sharp drop in the Guinness eBrand ranking health from March to April. The first is around promotions. So probably because of the activity around St. Patrick's Day and then the drop-off in that activity, from March to April, there were less products on discount and a lower than average discount. So if you look at the graph bottom right, the yellow and blue bars, you can see that the percentage of products within the portfolio that were on discount reduced, and the average discount that they were on promotion for is also reduced. And that's the main reason for their drop in their brand health score. And you can see that shown here. So looking at the data in our Metrico platform, we can start to see the granular detail of this. So if we look at Sainsbury's, for example, and you look at which brands were on promotion, you can see that in March, 2 of the 3 Guinness lagers were on promotion, the Hop House 13 and the West Indies Porter. Both of those were on promotion during this time period. In April, by the second week of April, there were no brands on promotion. So that explains the detail of that part of the ranking. But something else is going on. So the second reason of the drop in the eBrand health from March to April is novelty. So if we look at the bar charts, the yellow and blue bar chart on the right, you can see that there is a big drop in the number of branches that were stocking Guinness new products. So we class any new product that's been launched in the last 6 months. And if we look at this number, you see that it went from having 2,259 listings to, I think that's 1,957 listings. So while you would expect the promotions to stop after the St. Patrick's Day period, you wouldn't necessarily want the number of listings that you had from March to April to reduce after such a significant time of fairly high ad spend. You wouldn't want that. You would still want your availability for your new products to be really strong and really high. So this is the key factor that you can do something about, and you can spot and notice that this is going to hurt the eBrand ranking moving forward if we can't make changes in the number of branches that these MPDs are available. So I hope that gives you a good example of how you can use eBrand ranking to dive in to the individual drivers that are aligned with your sales and the precise details down to the granular numbers and the individual retailers that you need to focus on to increase your brand health and drive sales. So in summary, we believe that eBrand ranking helps solve some of the biggest problems in e-commerce brand health tracking. We think it's a simple way to understand performance because it's one simple number within the category. It makes sense of multiple channel metrics all at once. So it means that you don't get a headache. It's great for leadership teams, great for senior people within the business to understand the brand health with just one number. And it's easy to link the size of the prize in the channel to a single brand health KPI, because if your single score goes up, the size of the prize becomes bigger. So how do we deliver this service. So as I mentioned, it's an eBrand ranking service. So it's not a tool, it's not a login. It's a presentation that comes with consultancy and help and advice from us in Kantar Consulting. And you can run this in two ways. Either you can ask for a one-off report that covers the previous 12 months of eBrand ranking within your category, or you can look at this on an ongoing quarterly basis, where we can look at the performance of your brand over the quarter. How we do this is we provide you with the top 10 brands within the category and their relative performance. Then we analyze your brand versus a key competitor. And then we drill down into the 2 or 3 drivers that is driving your sales performance or provide the best opportunities for growth. And then we unpack that with consultancy to help you turn this into a real actionable plan for your business. So I think at that point it's a good time to ask if we have any questions.
So we have a couple of questions. We'll just kick off with the first one. I think it's quite a simple one, and we're just going to organise some of the others to direct towards Viv and Malcolm. So the first question, do you give different weights to the brand health factors?
Yes, we do. So the idea of each factor is that we weight it. And I suppose what you'd be thinking is, well, how do you know the weight you give to each factor is the right weighting? And that's where it comes down to having worked with a large number of FMCG brands over the last 10 years, and also working with Kantar Consulting to verify the weighting that we are giving to the factors within the brand health. The other thing to think is that I'm sure the eBrand ranking today in terms of precise weighting is not perfect, because we're all learning the channel and we're all discovering all the time the different value of each driver. So we see this algorithm as a living algorithm, a bit like how Google's search algorithm changes now and again. When we have new evidence that shows that a driver is stronger than another, then we'll upweight that driver to give you a more effective overall score. To give you a clear example, I think we could all agree that availability is a really strong driver of sales. If anyone's looked at Byron Sharp's work, you'll be familiar that physical availability is a key driver of sales and loyalty. So we weight availability relatively highly. If we got evidence in the future to suggest that should be downweighted, then we would make those changes. But it's driven on the behaviour that we see through our platform, the feedback and advice we get from working with clients, and the feedback and advice we get working with Kantar Consulting to identify the best drivers.
Okay. So we've got a number of other questions just coming in here. I think you've answered the question about markets outside of the UK, Viv. So we'll start off with the UK and then start to roll out to the markets. So hopefully that just gives an immediate answer to that question.
I would just say on that point, we're a very fast, nimble business. So if there's a key opportunity where working with a partner requires to have eBrand ranking in a number of European territories, then that requirement will skew our roadmap and we'll move in that direction. Okay. So if you're on the call and you're dialing in from a European hub and you're thinking, well, this is interesting, but not so interesting if it's just UK, then don't let that put you off getting in discussing, because the plan is to roll out pretty fast.
Yeah. So if you want to talk to Viv about your particular market, please just contact him with the details on the screen. Another question is about the impact on sales of climbing up the ranking. I guess that will be different by category and brand, but I presume there's relative sort of case examples of where climbing up the ranking drives sales performance, right?
Yeah, so the idea is that every factor that we put into the ranking is a key sales driver. Then we weighted the sales drivers in line with which we think are driving the most sales. So, for example, availability and promotions will get a higher weighting than ratings and reviews. So yes, that's exactly how it works. Now, the reason why this is important is that we know that you're all avidly tracking your EPOS data, but that doesn't necessarily allow you to connect your sales success with the activity that you did. And lining up the activity and your individual drivers with sales success is the hard part. So this is where this comes in handy. It makes it very easy to say, well, this is our sales, this is our EPOS data, and this is our current brand health. And if you track those two items side by side at a senior level, that gives you a steer of the ship. That tells you if you're going in the right direction. Will you be making more sales tomorrow or less sales tomorrow? And then for those who require the deep dive into the reasons behind it, you can do that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Viv. Another question is, how do you get to the data for share of favourites? Is that from the e-retailer disclosing their algorithms, or is it done in another way? So the question is really about how do you get to share of favourites?
Yes, and that's a really good question. So there's a broader question, which is where does our data come from? So some of our data is crawled from the retailer platforms across the UK and across Europe and globally. Some of our data comes from the platform in the UK for the UK ranking. Share of favourites is the retailer favourites list. We have 83,000 of them in the UK. We have access to them in the UK specifically because our users, our shoppers on the mysupermarket.co.uk platform log into their account and then log into their retailers' accounts. So that allows us to access their favourites list. So I think that's a key question, because in our mind, if favourites is responsible for 30 to 50% of sales, my understanding is that the vast majority of FMCGs are not currently tracking their share of favourites. But in our mind, it's a must-have foundational ability to track your share of favourites.
Okay. Another question here. We've been talking about consumer shopper-based retailers. Do you also have the ability to track and look at B2B retail? So cash and carry would be an example for ordering there.
We don't at the moment. We're looking at this. The challenge with looking at Bookers or Best Way, for example, is that they all operate behind a login. The technical team is talking to a couple of clients and figuring out how we can track wholesale. At the moment, we don't. So this ranking is based off traditional retailers and pure play at the moment. It doesn't include wholesale, but I do understand that there's a need to solve this problem in the near future.
So again, for those of you interested in that topic, please contact Viv directly. I'm sure he'd be happy to put a group of people together on talking about that topic, which is great. Thank you. And a couple other questions. Are the weights the same for all categories?
That's a great question. We've been discussing this. For now, they are the same. But we're probably thinking the same thing as whoever it was who made that comment. We absolutely believe that in the future you could weight a category different based on the category performance. So yes, I believe that at some point in the next year, a second version of eBrand ranking would look at category behaviour specifically. At the moment we don't do it because I think we need to get clearer on the individual nuances in each category to make that ranking perfect. But I'm very interested in doing that piece of work, and I think Kantar Consulting has got huge strengths in this area of understanding at a category level how the drivers are nuanced. So I think we could get there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Viv. So we've pretty much come to the end of the session. There's a couple of other questions here just related to how this ties in and joins up with other Kantar products. So if you're buying into Millward Brown or the Retail IQ platform at the moment, can these things be used in connection? So I think with those particular questions, we'll pick them up offline. We'll come back to you directly. So for those of you who've asked about your existing services and products with Kantar, we'll just answer those separately, just because of the specifics of each one of those products. I think that's all the questions we have time for and have received. I'm just going to have one last check before we close. Yep. So just one last question just come in. A challenge we have is to track online sales at category level, not at brand level. The brand ranking is obviously at brand level. How do you address the challenge of attributing online sales to particular action?
Yeah, I think I do understand that challenge. I think what we see from clients is having to piece together sales from different sources, where some is not split by channel, some you have a channel split, some you can only see your sales, some you can not see the category sales. For the UK, we have a market share feature that's based on the sales through our platform that provides a very quick and easy way to see your sales and category sales across all retailers and broken down retailer by retailer. It's not perfect. I don't think it's as good as the gold star of having your EPOS data, but the benefit of our service there is that it's instant and you don't have to put any work in. I do think that tracking category sales is a challenge. The key players in this market, I think, would be recognising this challenge and need, and we would hope within the next year or two that we would see some change in this area. But I can't really talk on behalf of other providers. But I'm definitely with you, whoever wrote that comment. I think there's a strong need to see sales within the category.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks for that, and thanks to Malcolm for a great overview of the e-commerce landscape up front that really sets this up and sort of points to why it's important that we get to a place where we can start to measure and track our performance online. So encourage you all to use the buttons that are in the webinar, either to contact Viv directly with more questions. For those of you not yet registered for the event in Amsterdam in May, please review that content, and if you attend that, obviously you'll get more airtime with Viv and Malcolm and the rest of the team to talk about these topics. But thank you to all of you who've joined today. If any of your colleagues didn't make it today, there is the recording. So for those of you who just want to listen to it all over again, you can quite happily log back in and look at the recording. But we'll send an email out to all of you today, whether you joined or didn't make it, to let you know the details of how you can review the content from today's webinar. Thanks to everybody. Have a great afternoon wherever you are. Many thanks.